Hello and welcome to Colour Multimedia Enterprises. My name is Luke, also known as Tianery, and in this particular video tutorial we are going to take a look at animating the player. Now, if you remember in the previous tutorial, we started off with a class called KeyState. So we're going to take a look at that. So I'm just going to open. As you can see, I've implemented tabs. So let's see, key state, file your items open does not exist. Okay. Does not create one. New src core key state. Apparently I didn't. Okay, never mind. Okay, so in this KeyState class, it is pretty much going to do what you expect it to do. It is going to allow us to manage our input. So I'm going to have a few functions in here. So I'm going to say public static function init, which we will call in our main class at some point. So we've got our init function here, and let me just double check something in a moment. Yeah. Okay, so in this class, what I want to do is I want to be able to get a variety of keys and put them into this class that we can manage. So I'm going to put in a private static var, and that is going to be an array of booleans, so that we can check to see whether or not values have been added. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for I in 0 dot 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 200, which sounds reasonable enough, I think. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push false into it. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to add an event to the stage. Now, before I do that, I'm going to do a OpenFL import OpenFL.lib. I'm going to say lib.current.stage, add event listener, and I'm also going to include import keyboard event, which I can't do like that because that's not how Hex works. So keyboard event, and I can finally type. Okay. So in here I'm going to say keyboard event. This is going to be key up, right? And that's going to take an event listener, which is going to be on key up. And I'm going to do it again, but this time it is going to be for key down. Keyboard event, key down, on key down. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to provide those functions. So on key up, which takes an e parameter, and what I'm going to do is in here I'm going to say keys e.keycode, and e.keycode basically gets the value of the key that you just pressed, right? And in the on key up, on the key down function even, it is then going to get the key that you are currently pressing down. Right? So So e.keycode, and e.keycode is an integer value. So the reason we did 0 to 200 means that we will be able to support up to the 200th ASCII equivalent character, which I actually don't know, if I may be honest, or whatever the index is up to that value. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a public static function which is going to say is key down, right? And that is going to take a key code which is going to be an int, and it's going to return a boolean value. So I'm just going to say return keys, key code. And that is literally it for this particular class. One thing I did forget is actually put package pour at the top. Okay, let's save that. Again, when I can finally type. Okay, so now that we've done that, what I want to do now is go back to my animation class and clean a few things up, because there are a few things that I know just do not work. So what I'm going to do is open it up in a new tab. So that's going to be src core animation.ajax. Zoom it in so that you can see. So there are quite a few things in here that I know just simply do not work. So what we're going to do is we are going to have, okay, we've got okay, I'm just double checking to see if everything's fine. Certainly looks that way, although what we're going to do is we're actually going to be implementing our own custom timer. So in fact, let me implement that first before I go any further. So I'm going to do new t, I believe. Did I add that functionality? I can't remember. Let's do that. Yes, it does. And it actually adds a new tab, which is a bit weird. Okay. New t. So I'm going to put into core custom timer, right? No, I'm going to put it into utils custom timer. And this custom timer is going to basically allow us to just measure the amount of time it takes to get from one update to another. And once it does, we're going to dispatch an event. And this is going to be one of the rare situations, well, not necessarily rare situations, but one of the situations where we actually use the msignals library to good use. So here I'm going to put package utils because that's the folder that we put it in, and the only class we are going to import is going to be msignal.signal.signal1. That's all we're going to be using. I'm going to say class custom timer. Again, when I can finally type. Okay, so in here I'm going to have a few public variables, so I'm going to say time started, that's going to be a float. Interval is going to be a float. I really need to fix that bug, actually, that's really annoying me. Current time float. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say private var seconds, so the amount of seconds that have passed. Well, it's not really seconds, it's more like ticks. I should really call it ticks. It makes more sense. And then public var tick, and this is going to be the signal itself. So signals are very easy to use. So if you were using a signal with no arguments, then you'd use signal 0, and then you wouldn't need to do any of this stuff here. Because I'm using signal 1, it takes 1 argument, so I need to provide a type. It's strictly typed, so I need to provide what type of argument or parameter, it doesn't matter, that you're going to be passing in. And in this case, I want to pass in an integer value, right? So I'm going to provide the means to instantiate this class, so new interval, and then what I'm going to do is time started is equal to 0. I don't think I even need this. No, I don't actually need that. What am I doing? Yeah, let's just get rid of that. We don't need that. Okay. So current time is equal to 0. This dot interval is equal to interval. Now the reason why we need to use this is because we want to be able to access this variable here and not this variable. Because we're within the scope of this function, and interval is already a parameter being used in this function. If we want to access the variable of the same name in this class, then we need to access it by prefixing this dot, right? So when you prefix anything with this, then that basically means you're accessing anything within the scope of this class, right? And then what we want to do is tick is equal to 0 here, and then I'm going to say tick is equal to new signal 1 int, like that. Okay, so now what I'm going to say is public function update. I'm going to pass in the delta time, which is of course going to be a float, and in here I'm going to say current time plus equals delta time, right? So the amount of time that was passed between this frame and the next frame. Then I'm going to say tick.dispatch. Nope, no, I'm not. I want to check to see if current time is greater than or equal to the interval that we give it. Now, the delta time and all that stuff, that's done in milliseconds, just so that you are aware. And I'm going to say ticks plus equals 1. I'm going to say tick.dispatch, and I'm going to provide the actual tick itself, a tick value. And then I'm going to say current time is equal to 0. And that is pretty much the custom timer class in a nutshell. So I'm going to save that and then actually go back to the animation class where we were taking a look at how this animation is actually going to start working. So I believe we don't actually need has changed. Don't think we do. So we can remove that. Everything else can stay. Okay. One thing I do know is that we need to initialize some variables. Now, the thing about Nico is that when we do test in Nico, there are some values that are defaulted to null, and misspelled that. That's especially true when it's integers, strings, and that sort of thing. So with integers, for example, it doesn't default to 0, it defaults to null. So every time we want to access it, it comes up with an error, we end up crashing, and we don't actually get to see that error because when it crashes, it closes both the windows, the console and the actual window. So outputting or trying to see what the error is a bit difficult. So that's a problem. So we don't need to change anything to this as far as I'm concerned, apart from the fact that what we will be doing is creating our bitmap. So let me just double check and see we do not actually have. So yeah, we will be needing bitmap data at least. So I'll call it BI, and I'll go down here. It's going to be new bitmap data, and this is going to be the same cell width and cell height that we give it, right? If that makes sense. I'm going to initialize indexes, and this animation is a bitmap. So what I'm now going to do is say bitmap data is equal to _BI, right? And that's all we need to do for that, as far as I'm concerned. And that's our initialization of the states there. So let's just bring that up to do all that. Okay. So now, if we go down, we've got this public function play here. If I just open the player class, so if I open this and zoom in, as we can see, we've got our update function here. Now, if we were to play it in its current state, what it'll end up doing is it will freeze the frame, or it'll look like it's freezing the frame, because every time we're looping this, we are getting the state animation, then we're setting all the current index. So this was actually one of the biggest issues that I had when trying to figure out what the original problem was. Now, this stuff I shouldn't be doing at all, apart from setting go back. So it should look like that, right? I need to remove this, and in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I'm going to get rid of that. Actually, Control X that actually. Paste it in here. So basically what I'm doing here is I want to only get the state animation if the current state name has changed. So the idea is once we've changed, what the hell's going on? Never mind. So the idea is, what if we change the name of the state, right? So when we go left or right or up or down, we want to be able to change the state immediately, because otherwise we'll end up with a delay. So between the previous animation state and this one coming up. So we want to make sure that we do that check, get the next state animation, and then set the current index to the start index so that it starts correctly, right? So now what we can do is get rid of this stop function because we no longer need it. And in the update function, what I'm going to do is actually pass in delta time. even though we don't really need to. It feels like it's required. What I'm also going to do is remove this repeat here, so we don't actually need that. As you can also see, I've got question marks in front. That just basically means it's an optional variable or parameter even. So we don't have to set it, but it's nice to know that we can. So let's scroll down and see what's going on. So as you can see, we're getting the state. If you remember in our animation tutorial, we're getting the state from state name. We're going to be checking a few things. What we've also got is this next animation part here, which we're now going to be replacing with seconds. So, or ticks even. So the amount of ticks that pass. So basically, what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring that up here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say timer dot update delta time. So I'm going to pass in delta time, which is actually why I needed that anyway. And then I'm going to say timer.tick.add. Now this is where we are able to actually add event handlers to our event signals, right? So I'm just going to pass in next animation, which is the function that we're going to be using in order to check things, right? So we're going to be doing this check. Now most of this is actually wrong, so I'm just going to get rid of this. Rewrite that in a moment. So if we go back to our get state animate, we've got our first, or rather index, which is what it should really be called. And then what we want to do is we want to get the point from that index. So we're just going to say indexes and index, right? And then we want to then copy the pixels from the sprite sheet using the point that we get and the cell width and the cell height, and then assign the bitmap data of this animation to whatever the new frame in the animation is. So that's all good, but we didn't really need to change much about that. But what we will need to do is do this check thing again. So if going back, so we're going to check to see if we're going back or not. And go back is in fact enabled. So have we enabled the fact that we can go back in the animation sprite sheet or not? And if we are, what we want to do is a simple check. So if current index is going to be -1, even, is going to be less than 0, what I then want to do is set going back to false, and I also want to increment current index. That makes sense. Otherwise, what we want to do is decrement it instead. And we're going to do another conditional, and we're going to check to see if we're not going back, and go back is in fact true if it's enabled. And in here what I want to do is check to see if current index +1 is going to be greater than current state index length, even current state length -1. Now if you don't know what's going on, basically what these checks are doing is we're checking the array bounds of the state. Now if we didn't do that, what we'll end up with is runtime issues. If we didn't do these checks and we just kept on adding current index, this current index is going to be passed in as a value in get state animate, which is going to be here, right? that start index is then going to be put into here. If it's out of range because either the value doesn't exist or the value is null, then it's just going to crash on us, and we don't want that. So we need to do these checks first. We need to check to see if the current index plus 1 is going to be greater than the back, is going to be greater than the length of this state, right? If that makes sense. And we also want to check to see if when we're decrementing, we don't actually go any lower than 0, because if you remember, arrays are 0 based, meaning that it starts at 0 and it goes up. So we need to do those array checks. So I'm going to do going back is equal to true here, and then I'm going to say current index minus minus, and if not, then we are going to do current index plus plus, and else either way we're just going to decrement current index, increment even. And that's all we're going to do. In fact, that's technically wrong, because we're going to be incrementing it. We still need to do the check anyway regardless, so I'm just going to copy and paste. Which one is it? This one. So if I do this one here, then we are essentially going to stop, right? So we're just going to return, otherwise we're just going to plus plus on the current index, right? What we could do is say that we want to get rid of the get state animate, but we haven't got that far yet, so we'll just leave that for the time being. So now that we've got this pretty much done, as far as I am concerned, I do believe we actually need to initialize the timer though. Yes, we do. Yeah, that needs to be custom timer, and the interval is going to be 250 milliseconds. Okay, so that's all good as far as I am concerned, and when I eventually be able to type, I can actually save that file. Right, so if we go back to our player, we're now going to actually use the key state in order to determine whether or not we are moving up, down, left or right, and then change the animation accordingly. So if, and making sure that I am in fact we don't even need to import it because key state is in this folder, so that's fine. So I'm just going to say if key state is key down, right, and then I'm going to pass in keyboard.w, so if we're going up, then we want to update the animation, so I'm going to pass in delta time here, again when I can type. I'm going to pass in the state that we want to use, 1. So if you remember, this is, if we go back down, that 1 value is the start index. And then we want to go back, we want to enable it. And now what we're going to do is anim.y minus equals speed multiplied by delta time. If you remember, we set the speed of this player to 0.1, which is fine as far as I'm concerned. And now we're going to do pretty much the same thing for all of the rest of them. So we're going to do it else if key state dot is key down, keyboard.a, so if we're going left, I'm just going to copy and paste one up. Oh God, So yeah, copy, paste. So this is going to be down, so I want to go down and I want to plus equals on that. I want to go down there like that, and then paste it again, and this is going to be left, so walk left, and this is going to be X, not Z, and one more time, and you probably guessed it, it is right. It needs to be an underscore, and that needs to be D, like that. And then we need to change this to X and plus equals like that. Okay, so let's save that. So now, all we need to do is go back to our main and just make sure that everything is fine. So, OpenFL core, no, src main. So I believe we are in fact using, we have already created the player. Yeah, so we've already created the player, but are we updating it? Yeah, we are updating the player as well. So let us build this project. Let's build this project. Is this the right one? Yeah. So let's build this project, shall we? Open command prompt. As you can tell, I'm using two screens now. Hxlib, run OpenFL, build project tags. I really need to sort this. Path environment thing so that I can do the shortcut commands. Oh, timer not found, line 22. Oh yeah, because it's utils, isn't it? And we no longer need those two either. So I'm going to say import utils, custom timer. Save that and try it again. This one here. Okay. Oh god, now we've got even more issues. Okay, custom timer, line 17 and line 30. And then identifier internal and tick. Hold on. That's supposed to be ticks. That, where is it? Where did I type internal? Oh. Very simple mistake. And what was the other error? And then identifier BI. Oh. Probably want to save that first. Save. And it was an animation, wasn't it? Line 123. Yeah, that's supposed to be an underscore in front of that as well. Okay. Okay. So this should now be everything. In your own time. RPGFL. Let's go into our bin. Windows, Nico. RPG tutorial, so let's take a look at what it looks like. And it is moving on the other screen. That's interesting. Okay, so now when I move it, it is properly animating. Now, as you can see, it looks like it's well, it's not quite properly animating, as you can see. That check didn't do its job properly, so I might need to take a look into that. Are we doing that check properly? We are doing the count. Yeah, well, we are doing the check properly, so I don't know what's going on there. If current state name is not state name, then we get the animate state. Huh, that's weird. That's not actually done the check properly. But anyway, so as you can see, that is now animating. Now, if you remember, because this is going to be pretty much a JRPG, what we want to do eventually is get this player not moving, just in the center of the screen, in theory. As you can see, we're revealing parts of the map now. So eventually what will happen is we will actually have this player be moving in the middle, and the actual map itself will be moving instead. So that's what, and that's actually probably a simple solution that we can probably do right now if we wanted to. So I might actually do that just because. So let's go back to here. So I'm going to remove all of this. Although now that I think about it, it's not as simple as I thought it would be. So yeah, we want to remove the animations here. Well, we want to update the animation, but we don't want to actually move it. And instead what we're going to do is actually move the map itself. So if we just save that. Now, as you can see, we've also got this draw thing here, which is going to be seen, which is where we pass in the sprite, and that sprite is going to be a map. So we're going to change that to being a different type of sprite. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new private variable, which is going to be, I don't know, base or something, which is going to be a sprite. We do not need any of those anymore. We're going to need that base there. Don't need that text field anymore. Yeah, that looks fine to me. Let's get rid of these pointless things, imports as well. Do we need any of those? Bitmap data. Doesn't look like we do. Okay, let's get rid of those as well. Whoops. No, we want the assets. We don't want the bitmap data. Okay. And now that I mention it, I'll probably end up breaking the game at some point. No, that's fine. Okay. So what I want to do is create the sprite, and instead of adding the player to the map, we're going to add it to the base, and we're also going to add the map to base as well. So once we've created it, we're going to say base dot add child. That's going to be map, and then we're going to add base to the camera. So now when we move when we move the camera, what am I doing? When we move the when we press WASD or whichever it is, then we want to actually move the base, not the base value, the map value, if that makes sense. So I'm going to do private function move map, pass in the delta time variable, it's going to be a float, and we are literally just going to copy and paste what we saw in player. So just do all of this and just replace a few things. So in here I'm just going to say map.x y even minus equals delta time multiplied by player.speed, because obviously it is the player speed. Ooh. Sorry about that. Because obviously it is the player speed that we're taking a look at. Then we can do map.y plus equals delta time times player.speed. Again, when I can finally type, and I'm just going to copy and paste this just to make life a bit easier. So A, this is going to be like that, and that's going to be X like that. Okay. Oh, and then we also want to actually move the map. So let's say move the map here. Pass in delta time. Eventually we'll have a system where we do everything in the camera. So we update the camera instead of the way we're doing it now. So we'll probably do some kind of organization tutorial at some point. So yeah, let's save this and take a look at the results, shall we? Oh, one thing before I actually forget is we need to make sure that the player is placed in the middle of the map. So what I want to do is cut and paste it here. So I'm just going to say max width divided by 2 minus player dot width divided by would be player dot anim dot width divided by 2. And the same for this one as well. Max height divided by 2. In fact, there's a better way of doing this, but I can't be bothered to take a look. So I'm not very good with maths, as you can probably tell. I'm good at arithmetic, but not very good at programming mathematics. Okay. So now we'll just save this and take a look at the results. Well, build it first and then take a look at the results. Okay. Oh. No, identify delta time. What's it doing? Oh, I must spell that. That's why. Right. No, it says private field speed. Oh, we can't do that either. Okay, let's make that public. We forgot to save it. We need to save it first, and then we can build. In your own time. There we go. Okay, so let's take a look at the results of that. So that's the character in the middle. Let's maximize it a bit. So now when we, oh, it's going in the opposite direction. Well, that's not good. Yes, of course. It's going in the opposite direction. And I think yes, no, we just need to do the W, so we want to go up, so map.y minus equals. Is it really just a case of doing this? That's odd. Odd. It's going in the opposite direction in both ways, going up, down, and left and right and stuff. So, yeah, that was a bit odd, honestly. I would have thought it would do it properly, but apparently not. Gotta do these checks, gotta test it as you go. There's no point in doing something, you do lots of things that you assume is going to be right, and then by the time you actually see the results, it's actually completely wrong. You end up having to go back and doing all these traces just to find out where the problem is, which is not good. Okay, so yeah, now it's actually working properly, as you can see. And also, as you can see, we don't actually have any collision. So that's something that we will definitely be taking a look at in the next tutorial. I have certain ways in which I'm thinking of doing that, and also implementing some kind of tile system. So we actually, so instead of doing all these pixel movement, we actually do it based on the tile that we're in, right? So that's something that we're also going to take a look at in the next tutorial as well. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and that was taking a look at moving the player on the screen. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.